Joined in our studios by SABC's foreign editor, Ms. Sophie Mokoena. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time. Welcome.
Morning.
Let's talk about the acts and activities of terrorism around the world. How much of media attention have they attracted?
Well, indeed, when such incidents happen, they really take a chunk of our news bulletin. You saw what happened last week on Saturday when we woke up in the morning. All over, all the news or international broadcasters were leading with the issue of France or the story of France. We did the same, even in the continent, everywhere, because it was a big story. Many people died, and of course, it was something that had to be reflected by the media. And indeed, you see all the time when there are attacks by Boko Haram in Nigeria, we do carry the story, particularly our primetime bulletins, but also our 24-hour news channel, which goes out to 50 African countries. We do carry the stories, and it's one of the big story of the day, if that has happened. We saw what happened on Friday. The Mali story was also high up there when you look at our bulletins, both our national bulletins, but also international coverage.
Now, social media seems to be having a different conversation, especially with Facebook coming under attack when they had a flag where, people could have it posted as their profile pictures. Some, especially Africans felt that why wasn't the same with Nigeria? Why wasn't the same with Kenya during the Garissa attacks as well as Mali? Is there sort of an imbalance on social media as far as the attacks are concerned?
I think this is in part the problem of media houses. When you look at the Western countries, the so-called the West, you have a vibrant media, but also you have lots of media houses and news agencies. Therefore, the story gets reported extensively, where it ends up kind of influencing the discourse, but also influencing everybody, be it business, politicians, and ordinary people or religious leaders. But in a continent like Africa, you do have media houses, you do have broadcasters, you do have news agencies, but they are not well-resourced, but also doesn't command influence. Therefore, at times, stories that happen in the continent in particular, or on the continent, they do get coverage, but not a maximum coverage or a comprehensive coverage. It is for that reason institutions such as the South African Broadcasting Corporation, a national broadcaster, our 24-hour news channel on DSTV, plays an important role in educating, but also to inform the whole continent in terms of what's happening in the continent. But for this to continue, we need support. For an example, you need support of newsmakers to avail themselves to talk about these things so that we can do these stories and do follow-ups. You need business to stand up and support such institutions and invest in institutions such as the 24-hour news channel so that we are able to go around the continent and also to do the stories from African perspective. But it takes a lot of work, it takes courage, but commitment. But we are doing our best, and we will continue to do our best to ensure that we tell an African story from the African perspective.
Now, speaking of the role that media houses can play, the Minister of State Security, Mr. Mahlobo, did mention that the media needs to play their part in fighting terrorism. Now, how do you think media houses can play that part?
I don't know whether we can play a role in fighting. Fighting. I have a problem with the concept fighting terror. We can avail platform like we are doing now, invite people to talk about this, and like we did with the minister, informing the public, but also the entire continent in terms of South Africa's position at a political level, but at the security level, also the state of readiness and the position of South Africa. We can go out and do the stories, report what has happened, but also we can investigate the root cause, because the important issue is what led to this. Who is responsible for these problems around the globe? And governments or heads of state and government, some of them must take responsibility in the way they conduct themselves when there are conflicts or in terms of protecting the interest of their countries. You look at what's happening up north in Africa, Libya in particular. Today, Libya, it's like a failed state because the way they handled the issue of Libya, was it a correct move for NATO to move there and just launch the attack without assessing the situation and whose side are they supporting, or who are these people that they are supporting, the so-called the revolutionaries? Yeah. And then you go to a country like Iraq. When that issue was handled, was it a proper way to go there and fight Saddam Hussein? And today we are stuck. It's a breeding ground for such militants. Therefore, leaders themselves, the world leaders themselves, must do a thorough introspection and accept where they have erred. And I saw the reports that President Obama somewhere indicated that the way they handled Libya and Iraq, they must also take a blame in terms of what's happening now. These are the conversations that leaders must engage in and be honest and accept and don't repeat the same mistakes.
I think it's fair to say that these attacks have also sown division between, UN member states, G20 member states, as well as, just other heads of states just accusing other leaders for involvement in these terrorist attacks. But what further impact do you think these terrorist attacks have also made, especially on some of the biggest gatherings we have around the world?
You look at what was supposed to be high on the agenda at the G20 summit in Turkey, issues of economy, global challenges of the economy, and also issues of poverty, ended up taking a back seat because you have this problem of the attacks in France. And therefore, leaders, of course, they spoke in one voice that these actions should not be accepted and they must do something, but also a commitment to ensure that they will put money to fight terror. But they couldn't agree in terms of how to deal with it practically. It speaks to the divisions. At the moment, you have the East Asian nations meeting in Malaysia, and President Obama quite strong in terms of the US position, saying that its allies will be relentless in fighting those that are involved in these acts. But now that what was supposed to be the agenda at this summit has kind of changed. You go to COP21, we are supposed to talk about an important issue of climate change, but there's currently everybody is worried about security in France. Some journalists couldn't even get accreditation because of fear that you can't just bring in many people at a place where now recently we had this kind of attack. And obvious, the issues on the agenda, this issue will find a place in the agenda. Therefore, it tends to divert the attention when we are supposed to discuss important issues. Pope Francis is visiting the continent starting next week. He will be in Kenya. Kenya has had such incidents. Therefore, everybody is asking a question: will the security in Kenya be up to the task to ensure that there's peace and security during his visit? The same question on his visiting Uganda. Will Uganda be able to handle the security matters? And the other country, Central African Republic, which has got serious problem, he is insisting that he is going there, and there are issues of security. Therefore, these acts tend to divert the attention from the important issues that we are supposed to discuss, like issues of poverty, unemployment, and the challenges of the economy.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we had for you. Thank you so much for joining us on AM News.
Thank you.
Well, that was SABC's foreign editor, Ms. Sophie Mokoena, updating us on the role that the media have played, of course, in covering the various terrorism attacks from Africa all the way to France. Well, we're going to take a short break.